Hello and welcome to Sansad TV. You're watching Viewpoint with me, Rausan Pereira. Well, the central government will deploy around 72,000 electric vehicle public charging stations across the country with a financial outlay of 2,000 crore rupees under the PM E-Drive scheme. The charging stations will be installed along 50 national highway corridors and at high traffic locations such as metro cities, toll plazas, railway stations, airports, fuel outlets and state highways. The initiative is aimed at reducing India's dependence on fossil fuels, cutting transport emissions, promoting domestic EV manufacturing, and enabling a national-level EV-ready infrastructure framework. In this edition of Viewpoint, we will analyze how to boost EV charging infrastructure in the country and what impact will that have on the ecosystem as a whole. Joining me on the program today are Somesh Kumar, partner, PAR, EY India, and Rajeev YSR, CEO, Thunder Plus. Thank you to both my panelists for joining me on this edition of Viewpoint. Rajeev, let me start the program with you first. Let's first try and get an understanding and overview really as far as the EV charging infrastructure in our country is concerned.
I think, Frank, thank you very much for bringing us here today. And the move by the government is definitely a very transformational and revolutionary move. The reason being this way, right? Gone are the days where EV industry was looking for, is it the vehicle first or the charging infrastructure first? I think now the approach that is taken by the entire ecosystem, including the government, is it is both first. And coming to our, I would say, oil imports bill, right? We are talking about close to $160 billion of current account deficit that we have right now, majorly because of the oil imports. And the shift from our dependence on these fossil fuels to these EVs is going to help us in two ways. Number one, definitely reduce our load on the exchequer. Number two, it is also an opportunity for India to emerge as not just an EV market for the rest of the players, but an EV, I would say, manufacturing hub, both for the domestic as well as for the international, I would say, markets. So in the context of this, the targets of the government of bringing 30% of electric vehicle penetration by 2030 can only be possible when the charging infra is available very, I would say, vividly and abundantly across the country. And these initiatives as this are very much important. Even as we speak right now, the EV charging infrastructure is still a very fragmented sector where the vehicle OEMs are trying to develop this, the charge point operators are trying to develop it, and many other players are entering to develop it. I think the holistic approach and the push which is being given by the government right now is going to set this in a different tone and emotion, which will pave the way for a faster adoption of electric vehicles in the country.
All right, so the sector or the segment itself is fragmented. We need a holistic approach is what Rajeev is suggesting. Somesh, let me come across to you now. Let's also try and understand the state of EV charging infrastructure as a whole. You know, in the past, we've seen that there have been complaints, there have been some concerns raised about how the infrastructure really needs to keep up with the times. How have things changed?
Yeah, so thank you, Frank, again for having me here. And I think, Rajeev rightly said that, gone are the days when there was a debate between what comes first, whether the EVs come first or the charging infrastructure comes first. Now it's absolutely clear that the charging infrastructure has to be in place for the EV6 ecosystem to thrive. So if you look at the current state of EV charging infrastructure, as you said, you mentioned that under the PM E-Drive scheme, we are targeting over 70,000 chargers. But that's a long way to go. Currently, we have, close to 25,000 public chargers, which, as was said, are again in a very fragmented manner, at bits and pieces here and there, which does not actually offer a very streamlined or a very planned sort of charging infrastructures being put up. Even these charging infrastructures, I would say, are undergoing a big spatial imbalance. Most of these charging infrastructures are in tier 1 cities with very limited availability in tier 2 cities and tier 3 cities, as well as some of the highways. So I think that really needs to be worked upon. Of course, in these tier one cities, the awareness is more, the acceptability is more. So that's where we are seeing charging infrastructure being mushrooming. But other than tier one cities, we really need to go down to the tier two, tier three cities also. Additionally, I think the EV to charger ratio still remains very high. I think it's almost 135 to 1. So we need to do more in setting up these charging infrastructure and also deploying, I think, the fast charging infrastructure, fast charging stations in the cities, and especially along the highways and routes where people do not or cannot wait more. I also feel that the home and workplace charging are becoming critical, but they are only a fraction of the population has access to such chargers. Still, while it is mandated that most of the public housing societies will have charging infrastructure, but we still see very few being adopted. Another concept, I think, which I would like to just bring about, and it's not directly related to charging infrastructure, but it is, why we are doing all this. We are doing all this to actually enable the transport system to become cleaner, greener. So unless we change the source of energy for these charging infrastructure, we are not going to attain our objective. So right now, most of these charging infrastructures are still energized using the conventional grid energy, which is based again on fossil fuels. So we need to embed more of renewables into the system, into these charging infrastructures to actually achieve our objectives.
I think
stop at that.
Absolutely. I think that's a very valid point that you're making about how we need to make this switch away from fossil fuels and get to renewable energy and bring in renewable energy into the charging stations as well, so that we can take full advantage of it and ensure that we have a cleaner and greener fuels to use going into the future. All right, Rajeev, let me come back to you now. Let's also try and understand, of course, the PM e-Drive scheme is the major big ticket scheme as far as EVs are concerned. But on the whole, if you look at schemes and policies of the government, both the center and the states, what's working really as far as EV charging infrastructure is concerned? How has it helped the ecosystem as a whole?
Yeah. So great, Frank. If you look at the charging infrastructure as a piece, and if you look at the investment that gets into charging infrastructure, we all need to acknowledge that this is very, very similar to a solar business, right? Where it's a capex heavy, I would say, investment heavy business, where you recover the return on investment over the years. Okay, that's the first base. Second thing, when you look at this particular thing as a phase, the power or the capex that gets into getting the power infrastructure ready is as high as the charges cost. Now, when I talk about power infrastructure ready, it could be the demand charges for the discoms, it could be the transformer charges, or it could be the HT charges that we are talking about. All of these, basically, that gets to the pockets of exchequer, contributes to close to 50% of the charging infrastructure's cost, right? So I think the PM e-Drive at this point of time also is focusing on these areas where they wanted to at least bring the upstream infrastructure. Now, when I say upstream infrastructure, whatsoever the capacity of the charging station that I intend to deploy, at least until the point of my input source, the government is willing to, or the government probably has to take the responsibility of all the costs that are involved, be it the transformers, right, be it the poles, etc., and ensure that the output power of the upstream is rightly available to me. That way, I think what happens is the CPO's numbers in terms of whether it is IRRs or in terms of the I would say profitability, whether it in terms of the viability of the projects, it gets better. Second, the CPOs like us will also get an opportunity to invest probably into 3 to 4 charging stations with the same, I would say, investment that we have planned for one. So I think the government support there is very, very important. Second most important thing is, if at all there is any rich real estate player in the market as we speak right now, definitely that is none other than the government, right? Whether it is the strategic locations within the cities or the strategic locations on the highways, right? The government has got access to beautiful locations. Now, these locations can be, I would say, places of recreational and I would say, economic activities. That means these charging stations could be the places where you get to host the digital boards, generate revenue through advertisements. These could be places where you can provide the washrooms and then the food and other facilities, especially on the highways, etc. Right. So one needs to develop multiple, I would say, revenue generating models along with this particular charging infra, which again eases down the cash flows, especially from a charge point operator perspective. Number two, the access to these lands, the access to these real estates also are to be promptly given by the government, because that is further going to ease and encourage the penetration of the EVs. And third and most important thing, Somesh has already touched on this point. When it comes to the four-wheeler adoption and when it comes to the adoption even among the two-wheelers, right? The public will most probably charge their vehicles at their homes, probably overnight, right? So at this point of time, as we speak, the charging infrastructure at residential is, of course, going as per, I would say, the demand and the supply, but there needs to be very definitive, I would say, policies that must be in place. For example, X percentage of parking lots must have, I would say, the charging infrastructure, or every parking lot must be given an opportunity to set up an AC charger there, like the way we have, for example, connections for ACs, connections for geysers. There should be connections even in the parking lot, right? And leave it up to the customer to buy a simple plug and play and then deploy it, right? Now, when these things happen right at the planning level, whether it is a residential building or a commercial building, right? The overall expense on the entire project comes down. It also gives immense confidence for people to go and purchase, because they don't have to really think on how do I get the wiring now. I live on the 20th floor. My meter is somewhere else. How do I get the entire wiring done, right? All these kind of practical issues, right, get resolved. I mean, the point I'm trying to bring is these are the policy interventions which needs to be done by the government. Number one, upstream power. They need to be very, very proactive in giving us the power and taking over the cost. Number two, real estate. They should probably give access to the strategic locations, which makes it viable for the public to rightly park. Number three, policy interventions to ensure the residential and then the commercial buildings will have the charging infrastructure as a thing.
Right.
And yeah.
Absolutely. Points well taken. I think this needs to be done. This needs to get into place really if we have to make full use of what's on offer. Somesh, let me come back to you now. Let's also try and understand, where do we stand really as far as global norms or global standards are concerned with regards to charging infrastructure? That is one. Second part of my question, of course, is which are the states which are really doing well when it comes to this particular segment?
So I think, 2-3 points there. And before I go into that, in terms of the charging infrastructure, also, I would like to highlight one or two things, which is that, clearly the charging infrastructure which has been set up, the demand or the utilization of that charging infrastructure is very, very low. It's not that the charging in points or infrastructure which has been set up is almost 100 or 90% being utilized. So that is not the case. So a very important thing to encourage private sector to set up, and this is not being set up by government. So, this is being set up by private sector with a motive to make profit, which is reasonable. So I think there needs to be some mechanism in policies, etc., to incentivize setting up of these charging infrastructure, even till the time when the utilization happens. So, some sort of incentive probably could be considered. It's very important. The other thing which is again very important is to have charging infrastructure set up which is uniform, which is called as ubiquitous charging. So wherever you go you can charge. It's not that certain charging points are not compatible with your vehicle which can charge. So I think these are some of the things which are very important. And since you touched the global example, I think these are the things which are happening globally also. We know certain countries, especially in Europe and US, are far more advanced in terms of adoption of charging infrastructure and electric vehicles. they have also gone through similar problems. I will not say that India is unique or, it is encompassing or, sort of going through something which has not happened elsewhere. But, we should, rather than reinventing the wheel, learn from the problems that have occurred elsewhere and sort of, work upon them from the beginning itself. For instance, the standards for charging infrastructure, it needs to be standardized across the charging points. It should not be that at a later point in time, we discover that the charging infrastructure is not compatible. So,
Yeah.
that was those were the points that I wanted to make. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Points well taken. Let's take the discussion forward now. Rajeev, let's also try and understand some of the biggest opportunities and challenges as well.
Yeah, great, Frank. Before I answer these opportunities and challenges, let me also quickly touch upon those two questions that you have asked, right? The global standards and then the Indian adoption, and then what are the states that are doing it better? So I think while initially India started with GBT as a protocol, which is predominantly the Chinese-based protocol, but after the geopolitical tensions, now we are inching almost more close towards CCS2 protocol, which is basically the European standard where majority of the, I would say, manufacturers. Now you look at any of these MGs, Hyundais, Mahindras, all the, I would say, OEMs that are launching right now are going through a CCS2 protocol. So in a way, India is already going for a fast charging standardization, which is CCS2 protocol. And when it comes to the states, definitely the states of Delhi, Maharashtra, Telangana, Karnataka have been doing exceedingly well when it comes to developing the charging infra. And surprisingly, Kerala also one step ahead in developing the public charging infrastructure. Now coming to the opportunities that exist, right? See, any technology will only flourish when it is democratized. Example, you look at the LED bulbs, or you look at the LPG gas, right? When we initially moved from a conventional cooking to a gas cooking, right? Only when masses adopt and it gets democratized, that's when the technology explosion happens. And it is exactly the case even with the EV charging infrastructure. For example, the fundamental question that we need to answer is, why not every house, why not every compound wall, why not every building, every pole be converted into a charging infrastructure, right? Like the way you have medical shops, like the way you have hotels, like the way you have kirana stores that are available across the country. Why not ATMs, for example, right? Why not each of these places have a universal charger, right in front of them, so that people are completely free of the charger anxiety? Now, Frank, if you may allow, there are certain initiatives also which we have taken. For example, we are the first ones to deploy a public charging station with the post office, right? India Post Office. We are the first ones to deploy a public charging station in the South Central Railway Station's parking. And we launched another campaign called Har Ghar Thunder, where we say every house, like the way we have an old STD booth business, right? Where unmanned business, you have a coin box, people come, drop the coin and call. Now the technology is very simple. People come, scan, charge and pay. So the EV charging needs to be looked at as an opportunity, right, by the Aam Aadmi and public as a passive income generator. That way it gets democratized. And second thing is, every real estate, I would say, opportunity, that is, every retailer, right, needs to set it up more like a telephone booth, right? They can easily set it up a pole-mounted charging infrastructure. And especially among the highways, etc., the hotels and motels and other important players, right, they need to have EV charging as a default thing, because now a lot of buses we see are getting into intercity operations, and each bus carries 30 to 40 people. So if the bus halts there for about an hour, number one, you get an additional business of 30, 40 people dining at your place. Number two, the vehicle gets charged in that 45 minutes to 1 hour, right? So the opportunities are immense. It is up to the public to come and seize these opportunities. There are many franchisee opportunities, very passive income opportunities, which companies like Thunderplus are giving in the market. We strongly encourage the public to come take over these particular opportunities. And definitely the challenges, yes, technology, power infrastructure, and upkeep, uptime of these chargers, etc., are definitely challenges. But nevertheless, nothing to fear as long as the partners take care of the place and then the space. the technology companies like us will ensure that the chargers are up and running at least with 95%, I would say, uptime. And things are all going to be very beautiful, Frank, and we need more public participation as a business opportunity here.
Absolutely. Since you've spoken about the opportunities and challenges, Somesh, let's also talk about how do we realize our full potential as far as, charging infrastructure is concerned.
So I think, I love the optimism which Rajeev displayed that, I completely agree that this needs to be democratized, it needs to be at a mass scale. Then only the full value will be unlocked. I do think that, a time will come when that will happen, but it's just that, as I said earlier, even now the charging infrastructure which is there, the little charging infrastructure which is there, is also underutilized. So if you're going to, have it at a mass scale, every house, every building, every sort of location, then where do we get its utilization from? And, whosoever is setting it up, whosoever is investing in it, will obviously want a return on their investment. So they can wait for a year or 2 years and then monetize that. But, it's a factor of how the demand for EVs also picks up. So while we are saying that whether EV or whether charging infrastructure, what comes first is not a question now, yet they go hand in hand in some ways. You just can't have idle infrastructure created without any EVs getting charged at all. Another interesting point which I would like to mention is that government still remains a very big player in this ecosystem. While the role of government is probably to set policies, to provide incentive schemes if they're like the PLIs, etc. But, in terms of creating the demand also and also the supply, government remains a big a player in this. For instance, majority of government vehicles, even now, the government fleet now is still not, running on EVs. So that is the first minimum step which government can take. All government owned vehicles can be, electric, so to say. And also on the EV charging side, there are immense number of government buildings in any city, government owned buildings or spaces, or like, public booths, etc. So all these can actually have charging stations to start with. It's not necessary that the private sector only chips in. Government has a role to actually catalyze demand. So once that comes in, I think the demand will pick up because the range anxiety will go away, and that's when the private sector can step in more to set up more charging infrastructure. So I think it's a cycle, but government can be a big stakeholder in enabling that.
Absolutely. Yeah, very, very, very well said. Time to get quick closing comments now from both my panelists with the best way forward and what next. Starting first with you, Rajeev.
Yeah, I think the days are great. It is an opportunity for India to, again, like the way we have evolved as an IT capital of the world, I think it's an opportunity for India to emerge as an EV capital of the world, both in terms of consumption and also in terms of production and exports. And charging infrastructure is going to play a very, very significant role, I would say, in this particular task. And India also has an advantage to learn from the mistakes of Western market, where I would say different protocols are put in place and too much of, I would say, divergence there. I think when it comes to India, a lot of convergence may happen, and with the protocols being standardized, the asset utilizations would be better. And again, I call for democratization of this particular technology. The public needs to participate. They should see this as an opportunity to consider earning it as a passive income. The days are great, and we excitingly look forward, thanking the government for their, I would say, a generous move on supporting so many thousands of chargers across the country. Thank you very much, Frank, for having me here.
Very happy to have you here as well, Rajeev. Somesh, please close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Yeah. So I would just like to make 3 points, slightly different from the charging infrastructure. Charging infrastructure, of course, goes, as I said, hand in hand with the EVs. So I think for promotion of EVs and creation of demand itself, I think 3 things are needed. One is the first one is to actually look at the cost. So, the cost of EVs still remains high, and that's essentially because of 2 things. One, the battery cost is high, which needs to be, still we are depending on imported batteries, China, South Korea, etc. a lot. So it needs to we need to do something about it. And government is coming up very proactive measure. It has come up with PLI schemes, etc. So that needs to be seized in the full manner. In that only is that a lot of ancillaries also, a lot of EV components, etc., are also all imported. So which again adds to the cost. So we need to somewhere create the ecosystem for those as well. The next thing, the second point which I wanted to make is about financing, both EV charging infrastructure and EVs. So we still feel that the financing can go a long way in improving the availability as well as the costs at which finance is available. So that again needs to be looked at. And the last thing which I wanted to mention is the availability of requisite skills in the Indian market. It's not that everybody is trained in e-mobility industry. So we need to bring in the right skill sets also through a conscious measure. And I'm aware that government is looking at a lot of these things through National Skill Development Council and other agencies. I agree, government is doing a great job. I think we just need to carry that forward in the right spirit.
Absolutely. All right, gentlemen, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. So what's coming out of this discussion is that the EV charging infrastructure sector or segment as a whole is fragmented. We need a holistic approach to ensure that, all the wheels come together and we move in a cohesive manner. We need to ensure that renewable energy is integrated into the system and not just be focused on fossil fuels, to ensure that we take full advantage of EVs and EV charging infrastructure as well. We need to learn from the mistakes that the other countries have made and put our best foot forward if we have to become the EV capital of the world. With that, it's a wrap in this edition of Viewpoint. This is Frank Rausan Pereira signing off.